Claire said the charges were for a client dinner. So I pulled every statement from the past 6 months while she slept. By morning, I knew everything. We had built something real, or at least I thought we had. 8 years of marriage, a house in the suburbs of Columbus, 2 kids, Ethan, who was 7 and mine by blood, and Lily, who was 5 and came into my life when she was barely old enough to walk. Claire and I met when Lily was 14 months old. Her biological father had been gone since before Lily took her first steps, and I never once thought of that little girl as anything other than my daughter. I coached her t-ball team. I taught her how to tie her shoes on the back porch one Saturday morning while Claire slept in. I was the one she called for when she had nightmares. I was a forensic accountant. I spent my days finding money people tried to hide. The irony of what happened next is not lost on me. For the first 6 years, things were good. Not perfect. No marriages, but good. We had the occasional argument about money. About how much time I spent at work during tax season. About whose turn it was to handle the school pickups. Regular stuff. The kind of friction that comes from 2 adults trying to build a life together while holding down jobs and raising small children. Then Claire got promoted to senior marketing director at her firm. I was proud of her. She had worked hard for it. The promotion came with more responsibility, a bigger salary, and, as I would later understand, a closer working relationship with her new direct supervisor, a man named Garrett who had transferred from the company's Denver office. At first, the changes were subtle. She started going into the office earlier. She stayed later. She joined a leadership development group that met on Thursday evenings. She started caring more about how she looked when she left the house in the morning. New clothes, a different perfume. I told myself it was professional confidence. A woman stepping into a bigger role, wanting to present herself accordingly. I told myself a lot of things. The first moment something felt genuinely wrong was a Tuesday night in February. I came home from work to find the kids already fed and in front of the television, and a note on the counter saying Claire had a dinner with a client that ran late and she would be home by 9. She got home at 11:30. I was still awake. I asked her how the dinner went. She said fine, lots of wine, boring conversation about quarterly projections. She kissed me on the cheek and went upstairs to shower. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. I told myself I was being paranoid. Over the next 2 months, the late nights became more frequent. One Thursday, she forgot to come home for the kids' bedtime altogether. I put Ethan and Lily down myself, read them their books, turned off the lights, and sat in the kitchen waiting. She came in at 10:15. Apologized, said the leadership meeting ran long. I told her it was fine. It was not fine. But I didn't know how to say that without sounding like I was accusing her of something I couldn't prove. I want to be honest about something. I am not a man who jumps to conclusions. I have spent 15 years as a forensic accountant. My entire career is built on evidence, on following paper trails, on not assuming guilt until the numbers tell me something undeniable. So I waited. I watched. And I kept telling myself there was a reasonable explanation. Then one evening in April, I was helping Ethan with a school project at the kitchen table, when his juice box tipped over and soaked a stack of mail I hadn't gotten to yet. I grabbed the papers to dry them off and noticed the top envelope was our joint credit card statement. It had already been opened. I assumed Claire had looked at it. I pulled the statement out to check the balance and set it aside to dry. Something made me actually read it. There were charges I didn't recognize. Not huge ones. Nothing that would have set off alarm bells on their own. A hotel bar charge for $47 on a Tuesday night. A restaurant I didn't know for $83 on a Thursday. A wine shop charge for $60 on a Friday afternoon. Each one on a day when Claire had told me she was working late or at a meeting. I finished helping Ethan with his projects. I read his book with him. I got Lily her glass of water and tucked her back in when she came padding down the hall. I waited until the house was quiet. Then I went to my home office, pulled up our full account history online, and started going back 6 months. I am a forensic accountant. I know what patterns look like, and what I found over the next 2 hours was a pattern so clear it felt almost insulting. Like whoever was helping Claire cover her tracks had not considered that she was married to someone who does this for a living. 41 separate charges over 6 months. Hotels, restaurants, wine bars, a weekend spa in Hocking Hills I never knew she went to. The Hocking Hills charge was for 2. She had told me that weekend she was at a work retreat. I did not sleep that night. I want to describe what it feels like to sit in your home office at 2 in the morning, in the house you bought together, with your children asleep down the hall, and watch the evidence of a double life materialize on your screen. It does not feel dramatic. It does not feel like the moment before a confrontation. It feels hollow, like someone reached into the center of your chest and removed something that was keeping the whole structure standing. I closed my laptop. I went upstairs. Claire was asleep. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom for a long moment and looked at her. Then I went back downstairs, made coffee, and started making a list. I am a man who makes lists when things fall apart. The next morning, I called my attorney before I called anyone else. Her name is Patricia, and she has been handling family law cases in Columbus for 22 years. I told her I needed to understand my position before I did anything at all. She told me not to move money, not to confront my wife, and not to do anything that could be used against me in a custody proceeding. She also told me to document everything. I already had. Over the next 3 weeks, I built a file. Not out of rage. I want to be clear about that. Out of habit. Out of the same quiet, methodical process I use at work when I'm untangling someone's finances. I pulled every statement. I cross-referenced dates with Claire's calendar, which synced to the shared family iPad. I found gaps. Appointments labeled client call on days in her office calendar, which I could see because she had never changed the sharing settings on our joint Google account, showed nothing scheduled. I also found Garrett. His name appeared in her emails. I had known her password for years. The same one she used for everything. Her mother's maiden name in the year we got married. I had never read her emails before. I read them now. What I found did not surprise me at the factual level. It devastated me at every other level. They had been seeing each other for 7 months. The emails were careful, but not careful enough. Corporate language that occasionally slipped into something unmistakable. References to the Hocking Hills weekend, plans for a trip to Chicago in June that I was apparently not meant to know about. And in one email, a line from Garrett that I read 3 times before I understood it. Looking forward to when things simplify on your end. Things simplify on your end. Things simplify on your end. I sat with that phrase for a long time. I went back to the financials. And this time I looked somewhere I hadn't thought to look before. The kids' college savings accounts. Claire and I each had signature authority. The accounts were held jointly. Ethan's account had been drawn down by $4,000 over 4 months. Lily's account showed a withdrawal of $3,200 in March that I did not authorize and did not know about. I sat very still for approximately 5 minutes. Then I picked up my phone and called Patricia again. She told me to come in the next morning. I did. I brought the documentation. Patricia looked through it for a long time and then looked at me over her reading glasses and said, "Marcus, you have been very thorough." We filed for divorce that week. Quietly. Claire did not know. Patricia filed a motion to freeze all joint accounts pending the proceedings and separately flagged the unauthorized withdrawals from the children's accounts for the court's attention. In Ohio, taking money from a child's dedicated savings account without the co-owner's consent is not a gray area. Patricia was not gentle in how she characterized it in the filing. I also, and I want to be honest that this was a deliberate decision, sent an email to Claire's HR department. Not out of spite, though I would not pretend spite played no role. But Garrett was Claire's direct supervisor. Their company had an explicit policy prohibiting romantic relationships between managers and direct reports. It was in the employee handbook. I had looked it up. The HR complaint was factual and documented. I attached a selection of the emails. I am a forensic accountant. I document things. Garrett was placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation within the week. Claire found out about it before she found out about the divorce filing. The night the papers were served, I was at my brother's house with the kids. Claire called me 4 times. I let it go to voicemail. The 5th time, I picked up. She said I was destroying her life over nothing. She said it was complicated. She said I didn't understand the pressure she had been under. She said she had made a mistake. I told her my attorney would be in touch and ended the call. I want to be honest about the weeks that followed, because I think people who tell these stories sometimes skip the part where it is simply hard. It was hard. I had loved Claire. I had built a life with her. The house was quiet in ways it had never been quiet before, even when she was traveling, because now the quiet meant something different. Ethan knew something was wrong. He is 7 and perceptive in the way that quiet children often are. He started coming into my room at night and climbing into bed next to me without saying anything, and I would put my arm around him, and we would both lie there in the dark until he fell asleep. Lily asked me one evening while I was making her dinner whether Mommy was coming home. I told her that Mommy was going to be living somewhere else for a while, but that she would still see her, and that I would always be here. Lily thought about this for a moment. Then she said, "You're my dad, right? Not the other one." I told her yes. She said okay and asked for more noodles. I will not pretend that didn't undo me a little. The divorce took 7 months. Claire contested several things, including the custody arrangement. Patricia was prepared for every argument. The documentation of the savings account withdrawals weighed heavily. The court was not sympathetic to the explanation Claire's attorney offered, which was that the money had been used for family expenses. An argument that collapsed when Patricia produced the itemized credit card statements showing that the family expenses in question had been a spa weekend and a hotel dinner for 2. I was awarded primary physical custody of both children. Claire received visitation. The financial settlement reflected the court's assessment of the unauthorized withdrawals. Garrett was terminated from his position following the HR investigation. He and Claire continued their relationship for approximately 4 months after the divorce was finalized, based on what mutual friends mentioned, and then that ended too. I did not take satisfaction in that. I took no particular notice of it. The day the divorce was finalized, I picked Ethan and Lily up from school. Ethan had made the travel baseball team that spring, and we stopped for ice cream on the way home to celebrate. Lily insisted on getting 2 scoops even though she always only finishes 1, and she did not finish 1. And I ate the rest of hers while she declared that it was too cold for ice cream and curled up in the back seat with her jacket over her legs. When we got home, Ethan dropped his bag at the door and ran upstairs to call his best friend about the baseball team. Lily stood in the kitchen and held her arms up to me the way she had when she was very small. I picked her up. She put her head on my shoulder. "Is today a good day?" she asked. I thought about the 7 months of court dates and late nights and explaining things to my children that no parent wants to explain. I thought about sitting in my home office at 2 in the morning watching a life come apart on a screen. I thought about Ethan climbing into my bed without a word and falling asleep against my side. "Yeah, sweetheart," I said. "Today is a really good day." She stayed there for a minute, then wriggled down and went to find her brother. I stood in the kitchen of my house now and my children's house, and I thought about what Lily had said. "You're my dad, right? Not the other one." There is a version of fatherhood that is biological and a version that is chosen and built day by day. And I have come to understand that the second version is not lesser. It is not a consolation. It is its own thing entirely, and it belongs to you in a way that nothing can take back. I made dinner. Ethan came downstairs and set the table without being asked, which almost never happens. Lily decided she was a vegetarian that week and negotiated loudly about the chicken until I offered her extra rice and she declared herself satisfied. We ate together, the 3 of us, in the kitchen of our house. That, I think, is the whole story. The beginning of it, anyway. I have thought a lot about what made the difference in how this ended. Not the divorce itself. Divorces happen every day, and plenty of them end badly for everyone involved, including the person who did nothing wrong. What I mean is the specific way things unfolded. Why I came out of it with my children, my house, my financial standing, and something that still resembles a life. I think it comes down to 3 things, and none of them are dramatic. The first is patience. Not the passive kind, where you wait and hope things improve on their own. The active kind, where you slow down, gather information, and refuse to act until you understand exactly what you're dealing with. When I first noticed the charges on that statement, I could have confronted my wife that night. I could have raised my voice, made accusations, given her the chance to explain things away or destroy evidence or get her story straight. Instead, I waited 3 weeks. I built a file. I called my attorney before I said a single word. That patience is the reason the court saw the full picture. That patience is the reason the children's account withdrawals were documented before anyone had a chance to dispute them. Every consequence that followed, for my wife, for Garrett, for the shape of the custody arrangement, trace back to the decision to be still and thorough before being loud. The second thing is clarity about what actually mattered. There were moments during those 7 months when I could feel the pull toward anger for its own sake. The desire to make things messy, to make sure everyone knew what had been done to me. I felt it. I won't pretend otherwise. But every time I sat down with Patricia and we made decisions together, I came back to the same question. What outcome do I actually need here? The answer was always the same. I needed my kids. I needed financial stability. I needed to be able to look Ethan and Lily in the face in 10 years and tell them I handled it with my head on straight. Everything else was noise. When you are clear about what matters, it becomes much easier to let go of the things that don't, including the satisfaction of public confrontation. which feels important in the moment and means very little afterward. The third thing is the hardest to articulate, but I'll try. At some point during this process, I stopped thinking of myself as someone things were being done to, and started thinking of myself as someone who had choices to make. That shift is not small. It changes everything about how you move through a situation like this. I chose to document rather than react. I chose to protect my children's legal position rather than my pride. I chose to stay in that house, make dinner, read bedtime stories, show up for school pickups, and be the stable thing in my kids' world while everything else was uncertain. Those were not things that happened to me. Those were decisions I made, one at a time, over 7 months. Lily asked me once if today was a good day. And it was, genuinely, measurably, a good day. Not because the hard part hadn't happened, but because of what I had chosen to do with it. That, I think, is the whole lesson. The outcome of your life is not determined by what other people do to you. It is determined by what you decide to do next.